Another big game. The Cincinnati Bengals come to town, and still much riding on the line.
We got to take care of business in our stadium. None of the other scenarios are relevant unless that transpires.
That's what it's all about. Time for us to come out here and show up.
Finish every damn thing, leave nothing to chance. Let's go out and take care of our business today.
You gotta be here. Unbelievable. He died in it. He's in. He's in. He's in.
Tonight on the Mike Tomlin Show, it's a must-win game against the Bengals tomorrow at Heinz Field. We'll give you a preview of Cincinnati. Coach Tomlin talks about the decision to run a fake punt against the Saints last week, and we'll use the rest of the show to highlight some very passionate Steelers fans. All of that and so much more as the Mike Tomlin Show starts right now.
Here we go.
This pass is caught, and that's a touchdown.
That's the way to work. Come on.
He's hit that sack. The Steelers win the football game.
Let's go. Come get it. You know what it is.
This one is in the history books.
Here we go.
The Mike Tomlin Show is presented by 84 Lumber.
Hello and welcome to this edition of the Mike Tomlin Show. I'm Missy Matthews. The term must win can be thrown around a lot in sports talk, but tomorrow's game at Heinz Field against the Bengals, well, it's actually a must-win game. And there's a few ways that the Steelers can sneak into the playoffs, but the simplest and with highest probability is to beat the Bengals and have the Ravens lose to the Browns. Now, after controlling our path to the playoffs for well over 2 months, we're left relying on the Browns to help us because we're stumbling towards the finish line, going 1-4 in our last 5 games. The latest heartbreaking loss was dealt to us last week against the Saints, yet another example of how turnovers are incredibly difficult to overcome in the NFL. Let's send it over to Bob Pompiani, who's with Coach Tomlin, to talk about not closing the deal on the Saints.
All right, Missy, thanks very much. Another big game. One left. It's a fan appreciation weekend. The Cincinnati Bengals come to town. But first, let's take a look back, Coach. That was a game that was highly entertaining. I mean, you guys stood against that team toe-to-toe all the way to the end. Just overall, how disappointing was it for you guys not to close the deal?
You know, we don't care about their record. We got respect for those guys and their positioning. We understand they're the number 1 seed in the NFC. Our intentions were to win the football game and win the football game in their environment. We knew that that would be a tall task, and we turned the ball over in the second half late in the game and in scoring territory. You can't do that, and we didn't get the necessary stop on defense late in the game. So we got aware of that. We do. You got to talk about the penalty component of the game as well, too, in terms of being a deciding factor. We seemingly had 2 fourth down stops in that game that was nullified by penalty because, you know, we were penalized for DPI. So those are possessions and points. Both possessions ended up in touchdown related drives. So we got some things to address there as well.
Looking at that one on Hayden, and you know, it was a 4th down play, and it resulted in like 30 extra yards, spotted the foul, but have you had time to look at it and think, you know, maybe?
My opinion is not going to change regarding it. It's no different than a jump ball at the end of a half or a game. It was a scramble play. The quarterback was out of the pocket. You had a couple of guys tracking the ball. There's some jockeying in that position. You could call a penalty on every Hail Mary if what you saw on that play was the premise of a penalty. Because you could look at any Hail Mary and you see guys gathering and judging and protecting their space with their arms or forearm as they track the ball. Just one of those unfortunate things that occur in the game of football.
One of the bigger plays was the call for a fake punt. Element of surprise is something that normally helps those plays, and I think a lot of people were surprised. What goes into that decision? Why did you make it, and would you have considered just keeping your team out there and going for it on 2 consecutive downs?
I felt really good about the look. The look was perfect for us. We had worked that that play for, gosh, the better part of the season. The guy that was carrying the play as a running back, a ball carrier, it's in his wheelhouse in terms of reading those interior lanes. And obviously Rosie's a power runner. I felt really good about it. We just came up a half yard short. I felt good about it even if we didn't convert, because I didn't want to give Drew Brees the ball last. And I thought that even if we didn't convert, even if we didn't stop them, it ensured that we would have the ball last. So all of those things kind of played out, unfortunately. We didn't win the conversion opportunity with our punt team. We didn't stop them with our defense. We did have the ball last, but we didn't execute when we had the ball last. But all of those things go into the decision-making in terms of executing a play like that.
All right, when the Steelers take the field next, it'll be the final home game, Heinz Field, 425 against the Cincinnati Bengals, and still much riding on the line. When we come back, Coach Tomlin will talk about that challenge and more. Missy, back over to you.
Thanks, Bob, and thank you guys, the fans. We'll be recognizing Steelers Nation all day at Heinz Field tomorrow in a number of different ways. And it's always a fitting way to end the regular season by saluting the best fan base in the NFL. And coming up next, you've probably seen this iconic NFL film shot from the 1970s. We meet the subject of that historic clip next.
I just felt that energy behind me, and that was Steeler Nation. Everyone wanted me up there.
The Steelers' official mobile app brings your game day experience to a whole new level. The app features a new game center full of stats, drive charts, and video highlights. Following the game, watch live press conferences and video interviews. Download the Steelers' official mobile app for free today.
I've been a fan all my life, and it was just really a dream come true to even think that I could have my wedding here. Well, yeah, just growing up in Pittsburgh, Steelers is just a way of life, really. It's not just something that's September through February. It's all year round. It's really in every part of my life.
When she brought up the idea about having a Heinz Field, I mean, at first, I thought it was fitting because she's the biggest fan ever that I've met.
One of my favorite things was my invitations, but it's basically like a ticket. This was perforated, so they would just rip this off then, and that was the response to it.
The guests really, still talk about it to this day, and like how it was one of the best weddings that they had ever been to, and just so unique, and yeah, it was just a really great experience for everybody.
In 1962, when Ed Sable paid for the film rights to the NFL championship game, the way the fans saw the sport of football would forever be changed. NFL Films has been responsible for capturing every iconic moment of the NFL's modern era, like these two that you're probably familiar with. But over the years, NFL Films has also captured the passion and the enthusiasm of the fan bases that love their teams unconditionally. And sometimes when those film cameras were rolling, a fan would become part of the NFL lore. In the following feature, we meet Ken Statterman, who famously waved his terrible towel while perched atop the dugout at Three Rivers Stadium in 1979. You've probably seen this clip 100 times before, but now you get to meet the man behind the image.
Just the energy that was in Three Rivers Stadium, it's indescribable. I just felt that energy behind me, and that was Steeler Nation. Everyone wanted me up there. I just felt like I was part of that crowd, part of that excitement. It was the 1979 AFC Championship game at Three Rivers Stadium against the Houston Oilers. I jumped up before the play started and I screamed, "Come on, let's go!" And Rocky Bleier took a handoff from Terry Bradshaw, touchdown Pittsburgh, put us up in a lead and pretty much clinched the Steelers to go to Super Bowl 14 against the Rams. And I was near the dugout, sitting in the end zone, and I just felt this energy come from Steeler Nation behind me. And I jumped up on the dugout, and everybody just felt the entire Three River Stadium, the energy in that place was remarkable. I remember at the time when they scored, I just seen the NFL Films camera crew, the camera in front of me, and I seen him capturing me just that brief moment, what is it, 10 seconds? Cut above, that was the highlight film, a 1979 Pittsburgh Steelers highlight film. And I found out that they were doing a preview at a bar, a local bar, of the highlight film. He says, "Kenny, you're in it." You know, at the time you're 18 years old, you don't realize that you're part of history. And you know, I'm a huge Steeler fan. You can ask anybody, and wherever I went, everyone was telling me, "Hey, you're the guy that's on NFL Films," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just a typical Steeler fan, and I always will be."
There's plenty more coming up on the Mike Tomlin Show. Up next, it's a completely different looking Cincinnati Bengals than the team we saw in Week 6. Coach Tomlin tells us what to expect.
The Steelers' official mobile app brings your game day experience to a whole new level. The app features a new game center full of stats, drive charts, and video highlights. Following the game, watch live press conferences and video interviews. Download the Steelers' official mobile app for free today.
So I'm going into my last year at Geneva College in summer of 2001. And I'm thinking I have to be at this first game at least. And I'm starting to think, you know what? I got to get season tickets for this first year. Long story short, I find a pair of season tickets. Well, at the time it was $6,000. So what did I do? I sold my cars. I sold my clothes. I had an old 78 Firebird. I sold that. I had a Steeler truck. And pretty much anything that wasn't nailed down at home, I sold it. And, you know, all my friends during the season, everyone I talked to, is the streak still alive? Is the streak still alive? I'm like, yeah, of course, you know. Here we are. It's 17 straight years. I'm going 17s on, and 183 games ever played here. Preseason, regular season, playoffs. I've been here this long, I got to keep it going, you know, 17 years strong. Hopefully another 17 at least, you know.
The Mike Tomlin Show is presented by 84 Lumber.
Well, to say the season hasn't gone as planned for the Bengals would be an understatement. When we traveled to Cincinnati in Week 6, the Black and Orange were leading the AFC North at 4-1, and their offense was the toast of the NFL. After our 28-21 victory, the Bengals' offense began to decline in a hurry and were plagued with injuries during the final 3 quarters of the season. They lost Tyler Eifert for the year, Joe Mixon for a month, A.J. Green for the year, Andy Dalton for the year, and now Tyler Boyd is banged up. Eliminated from the playoffs at 6-9, the Bengals can only play spoilers to the Steelers' playoff chances. And if you recall, we went into Cincinnati back in 2006 for the last game of the year to spoil their playoff hopes. So you can bet that Marvin Lewis would love to finally get some payback for that. Bob?
All right, Missy, thanks very much. Final game of the year, Cincinnati in town. We don't think it's going to be the final game. You're going to need some help. You've been in that situation before. Wild things happen on the final weekend. Just your take about having games opposite one another and the temptation to watch scoreboards. I know fans do it. How do you stop your team from doing it?
It's a natural thing. I don't think it's something that you try to fight against from that perspective. But you got to understand that there's some scenarios, but in all the scenarios, us beating the Bengals are part of the scenario. So they're in Pittsburgh to play the Steelers. We understand what that means in terms of their mentality. And so from that standpoint, it's helpful in terms of our focus.
Let's talk about Cincinnati. They don't have Andy Dalton. He's out, but they have guys in there who are making some plays. And last week, their quarterback threw a couple of touchdown passes against a Cleveland team that is 5-1 in their last 6. What dangers do they present?
And that's a great way to put it. We've been focused on the challenges of no Dalton and the challenges of some of the things like no A.J. Green. There's an element of surprise. There's an element of the unknown. We've been sorting through that this week. Driscoll's extremely athletic. He was 4'5" when he came out. You see his athleticism play out in their schematics. his mobility is an element of play in ways that Andy's is not when you play Cincy. The lack of A.J. Green, the knowledge of A.J. Green and how they utilize him and how the dominoes fall off of that helps you prepare when you play a team like this. The absence of A.J. Green really creates a void that makes them less predictable, particularly in situations. So we gotta sort through some things. We gotta work to minimize Ross, their speed, wide out, highly talented guy. Erickson has made some plays for him, particularly in recent weeks. That dynamic return man, the utilization of the tight end position is a significant one. We ran into the utilization of the tight end position last time we played them. Sometimes the loss of people creates opportunities for you, but as you prepare, you acknowledge that it's going to create opportunities. You better acknowledge some of the issues potentially that it could create for you, and the lack of predictability being number one.
One final thing, and that would be, I want to go back to last week because Juju Smith-Schuster played a tremendous game, but he took it very hard, given that his fumble kind of ended things abruptly, and he was right on the verge of field goal range.
You know, I expect him to take it very hard, first and foremost. There's a lot riding on these games, man. This is, you get 16 opportunities. There's urgency in the game of football. I think that's why, you know, the relationships with the fans are what they are. You know, this is our last opportunity to perform in front of our fans in Heinz Field. It's fan appreciation game. But we've only had 8 of those opportunities. There's some scarcity in this thing. And he feels that, and I think his words kind of reflect that. He's going to be a great player for us. He's a significant player for us now. One of the reasons why he is now, and he will be, is he cares. And he takes ownership. And he wants to be a positive contributor to our cause, and he's willing to accept ownership when he isn't. And so I don't view any of that as a negative. Obviously, I'd like the game to unfold in a different way, but the way that he's responding to the circumstances, what you're looking for in a young guy that you know is going to be a part of your program.
All right, when we come back, we'll continue with Mike Tomlin. We have some interesting things at the end of the program. For right now, let's go back to Missy Matthews.
Thanks, Bob. Coach could not have said it any better. I fully expect to see Juju bounce back tomorrow and have a huge game in front of that raucous Heinz Field crowd. There's plenty more coming up on the Mike Tomlin Show. We head to the tattoo parlor next with a Steelers fan who's not shy about making his fandom permanent.
The league considers rule changes annually. We want to keep the game competitively fair, and we just want to make the game as safe as we can make it. Recently, we expanded the horse collar tackle rule to not only include inside the collar, but outside the collar. Guys were being injured, so we expanded that rule. You talk to the players about why the rule is being changed, but then you also talk to your coaches about how it might change our instruction. You know, the game is evolving, and it's evolving for the better.
Steelers fans come from all walks of life and show their black and gold pride in many different ways. When Steelers Nation Unite member and United States Navy veteran Scott Wolf sent us pictures of his tattoos, well, we were certainly intrigued. When Scott was an active Navy SEAL at the age of 23, he began his tattoo collection with the SEAL Trident. Years and dozens of tattoos later, we met up with him before getting inked with his latest inspiration, a Mean Joe Green portrait.
I'm Scott Wolf. I'm from Adrian, Michigan. I grew up a Steelers fan. I started probably when I was about 8 years old. As I grew up, I had joined the military. I went out to California. I was a Navy SEAL. I had a lot of friends in there that were Steelers fans. So I was like, what's something permanent that I can have and keep with me all the time? I don't need to take on or off, and I decided on tattoos. So the first one I got was Terry Bradshaw. I had found this, it was actually off the cover of the Sport magazine. Then I decided after him, I would get my other favorite player, which is Jack Lambert. And then I decided to take the leap, and so I decided to get Joe Green. And it's a great shot of the helmet and his face, and it's clear. And it's got his jersey number too.
I'm Sarah Miller. I've owned my shop Wild Child Pittsburgh for 5 years now. We just celebrated our 5th anniversary. I'm here today with Scott, and we're going to be doing a portrait of Joe Green to add to the Steelers sleeve that he and I started several years back. and I specialize in photorealism. I usually take my time a little bit. You're looking anywhere between like 6 to 8 hours overall for the entire portrait.
I guess telling Steelers Nation is never give up hope on the Steelers. Don't treat them as a bandwagon team, treat them as a lifelong team. Every team has their ups and downs, and the Steelers have had way more ups than they've had downs. You get hard on the coaches, get hard on the players. Everybody has a bad day, a bad game. Never give up hope, because the Steelers will pull through. They've got 6 Super Bowls to prove it.
And Scott also attended the annual Steelers men's fantasy camp in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, where he had the amazing opportunity to meet the legendary Joe Green and actually show him that tattoo that he got to honor the Steelers Hall of Famer. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of the Mike Tomlin Show presented by 84 Lumber. Before we say goodnight, let's get some final thoughts from the head coach.
All right, Missy, thanks very much. It's been an interesting time for the Tomlin family, not just holiday time, but your oldest, Dino, committed to Maryland to play football. I know he's a hard worker. First of all, why not William and Mary?
He didn't want to do anything associated with me, including my alma mater or where I live. So, I understand that he's 18 years old. What I do for a living, particularly when your passion is football like his, it casts a significant shadow. And he wants to be his own man, and so that's why he made the decision that he made, and I'm a full supporter of that for those reasons.
What was it like as a parent watching your son being recruited?
It's interesting, he's pretty level-headed in terms of a kid, he maybe doesn't fall victim to some of the things, but, recruiting just concerns you as a parent because the guys get told over an extended period of time how special they are. And in this business, you know that they're not. But from a parent's perspective, and it's just interesting to watch it. You could be misled in a lot of ways, maybe not intentionally, but unintentionally. The things that you do to make a kid feel wanted doesn't necessarily lend itself to gritty, hard, blue-collar work. And so as a parent, you just want to guide your son through that and make sure that he keeps his feet on the ground. And he was able to do that, and he's been working hard. He didn't get too distracted by the process, which is good.
I'm sure your wife had a lot to do with that too. Keep him grounded, right?
There's no question, man. My wife does not play.
Mike, thanks very much for the time. Happy New Year to you, and we'll see you again next week.
You know it. Thank you.
All right, that's going to do it for the Mike Tomlin Show. For Missy Matthews, I'm Bob Pompiani. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next week for another edition of the Mike Tomlin Show presented by 84 Lumber. Happy New Year, everyone.